All right, welcome back. What the heck happened to my camera? Oh, there we are. A little too rambunctious with the camera. Okay, welcome back to the Nick and Joe show, folks. We were talking about. Oh, my lovely wife's brought me a little bit of water. Thank you. We were
Is
talking
that a
about American
golden? Is that
politics.
a golden cup?
It's a copper-colored cup.
Oh, look! It looked like I was just thinking of Russia's gold-colored microphone on the
Mm.
EIB network.
Yeah, you know, I still miss him. Oh my God, he was he was my hero when it comes to talk radio. I got to tell you, I learned a lot from him. And why can't I get that lined up right? I'm going away. There we are. That's better. There we go. Now you can see my. Ugh. I shaved tonight. Anyway, um, according to the medical officer of health for the province of Ontario, he is now mentioning. He is talking about the going back to not. He does. He didn't use the word mandate, but he's recommending people start masking up again inside when you are inside a public building, a mall or a store or a hockey rink or something like that. And if it didn't work the first time, why are we going back and doing it again? Masks never, in my mind, they're like using a chain link fence to stop a handful of gravel. And this debate has gone on and on and on for the 3 years that COVID's been with us. Won't that thing finally die? But I have no interest in going back to anything like that. It just didn't work. And yes, I see you lighting that cigar.
And I can't smoke my cigar when I'm wearing a mask.
No, you can't. And it's not fair that you should have that nice cigar. Oh well.
Well, how socialist of you, Nick?
Well, I didn't say, oh, yeah, you're right. You earned it. You can smoke it. But I want one. Actually, I want my pipe, which is out in the truck.
I will
I
be
haven't
with
smoked
you in
that
a
in a while.
moment, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, so I'm going to fill in for him. Actually, smoking a cigar and smoking a pipe are completely different. This is a whole new topic I didn't even consider, but because you don't inhale that thing, you just puff on it. Same thing with the pipe. If you inhale it, you die. You die instantly. You die on the spot because they're not meant to be inhaled. You enjoy them. You enjoy the aroma. You
Right.
enjoy the
You
process.
you only
Like
get
how long does
you only get throat cancer, no
no
lung cancer.
lip cancer? If you smoke a pipe, you smoke it always in the same spot, you might get lip cancer. I had a doctor explain that to my wife once. Anyway, because and again, it's because you're not inhaling and ingesting the carcinogens in the smoke, and high quality tobacco is one of life's great pleasures. Now, let me ask you something, Joseph. Since you've been coddling and caressing that thing for a while now, how long does it take you to prepare to light that cigar from the time you take it out of the humidor to the time got a smoking ember on the end of it?
Well, sir, this particular cigar took me a few days, but there was absolutely no reason why it should have. There was no ritual around it. It was just that I couldn't think of a good time to do it or a good place to do it. But now I'm thinking to myself, what better time to do it than right now on the air on the Nick and Joe show and sharing this moment of pleasure with our viewers and our listeners, but mostly our viewers, who I know are just very envious of the fact that I'm having my cigar right now, defying what will probably end up being a rule if the internet censorship bill passes Parliament and becomes law, preventing me from doing this and badly influencing all of those people out there. So this is me thumbing my nose and my cigar at the government that is talking again about this mask business. And I have to tell you, I don't get. There are times, Nick, when I think to myself, and I'm not sure if I've used this phrase on the show before, but it's like I'm living in a Harry Potter movie. It's the world around me is so full of fantasy, and particularly decision makers, people of influence, people of authority. It's very frustrating. Look, when I go back to the original outbreak of COVID, what was that? 2020, I think, spring or early winter, midwinter 2020, or something like that, around the turn of the year. So it was early 2020 when this whole thing started,
Right.
and at that time, and then we had this massive wave, and people were scared. Okay, people were afraid, and they didn't know what to do. So the government started taking draconian measures. And their draconian measures at the time were, because we didn't remember, we did not have at that time vaccines. Nobody had come up with these vaccines, or whatever you want to call them. Okay, we'll call them vaccines for now. So nobody had come up with vaccines. So the government had two things that it did. The first was, in order to enforce social distancing, it imposed strict rules on how many people could be going into certain buildings, certain stores in particular. So I don't
Right.
know if people remember, certainly here in Ontario, lining up outside of your grocery store because they were only allowed to let a certain number of people in. And so when somebody would leave the grocery store, they'd let somebody else in. So that was the way that these guys would do it. So there was social distancing, there were a limited number of people. And I don't know whether anyone remembers this, but the curve, remember everyone was talking, the phrase was, we have to bend the curve, we have to flatten the curve. The
Flatten the
idea
curve.
being that
Flatten the curve.
we didn't want the increase in infections to continue to grow exponentially. Okay, and guess what? That's what happened. All right,
Mm-hmm.
we got this thing under control. So what does all this have to do with masks? There was no mask mandate at the time. Okay, I went into the grocery store. I waited outside in line like everybody else. I went in with a limited number of people. I went out. Okay. I did all of those things, whether I agreed with them or not. Those were the rules. I never wore a mask. Didn't wear a mask. Some people wear masks. I don't mind. If you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. But I didn't wear a mask and there was no mask mandate. So the point I'm making is that when the virus first struck and the infection rate was climbing, the steps that the government took, regardless of masking, seemed to be effective. And then, of course, now in the summertime and fall, now we're introducing these new vaccinations or inoculations or whatever you want to call them, which were at the time supposed to also stop the spread of the virus. Of course, we now know that, and everybody admits, including government officials and scientists, etc., that actually the immunity, so-called, that we get from these vaccinations doesn't last, and so people want you to have a third and a fourth and a fifth vaccination, etc., etc. Look, all I'm saying is this, okay? If you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. If you feel that it's protecting you to wear a mask, wear a mask. Okay? But don't demand that other people wear masks. And for pity's sake, don't give me this pseudoscience, okay, that the Ontario medical officer of health or whatever they call his title is now talking about. Okay? No mask mandates. There's no need for them. If you feel if you don't want, if you think masks work and you don't want to take a chance on catching the virus, wear a mask. Nobody's stopping you from wearing a mask.
Well, you know something, if they had made that point, if they had said that from the beginning, everything would have been fine because it's left up to the individual. If you feel comfortable, you know how everything's about feelings now, right? So if you have someone who is worried, anxious, and they find that this is a comfort for them, that they want to put a mask on, uh, fine. We have people today still wearing masks. And I'm the last person to ever go over and say, look, don't look like an idiot. Take the mask off. They don't work, because it's not necessarily about the functionality. It's Linus's blanket. It's whatever it is. It's a support feature that they draw strength from. And if that's what it takes to make them feel like they can go out and participate in society, I don't care. Just don't expect me to wear it. I've got no interest in it. I don't think they work. I think it's a complete waste of time and money. The whole thing, this thing has been a scam since the beginning. And I've said that since the beginning. We've seen what happens when the government starts to come down with more and more draconian and ridiculous laws and rules. That's what the whole protest in January was about, that this so-called commission is supposed to be finding out about. There's been some real bombshells dropped in there, and yet nothing's changing. So they're still talking about the only place in Canada that is not going to go down this road is Alberta, under the new premier there.
Well, in fairness, I don't think ultimately Ontario is going to go down this road either. I think that the turmoil with the Freedom Convoy in February and March in Ottawa, and not just in Ottawa, but in many other locations across the country, I think that it created so much havoc and etc. that I think that governments are going to be very reluctant to try to reimpose these kinds of mandates. But look, Nick, I as you know, because you were living here too for many years, I'm a half an hour drive from the U.S. border.
Right.
I get in my car. I'm down in the States fairly regularly. I have family in the United States, and I go down to Ogdensburg if I have to pick up packages or whatever. So here's the thing: I cross the border, and there's no mask mandate, and nobody's wearing masks, and it's been that way for quite some time. So you look around you, and where is society falling apart? Where are all of the sick people? Now, that doesn't mean people aren't getting sick. Don't get me wrong, okay? The last thing I want is for anybody to misrepresent what I'm saying, misconstrue what I'm saying, misquote me, or anything like that. COVID is a virus. You get sick from it. Some people get sick enough to die from it, okay? But it's not, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not so
Lethal.
widespread, and it's not a threat to society. Okay, society. Maybe 2 years ago, when we didn't really know what we were dealing with, okay, there was a reason to play it safe. But now, okay, you just take reasonable measures. Stuff, that you were taught about proper hygiene when you were a child. And that's generally enough. Are people still going to get it? Well, yeah, just like people get the common cold and like people get the flu, and perhaps COVID is more serious than the common cold. And as I said, yes, some people die from it. But is the situation so dire from a societal point of view that it requires these draconian mandates and having by law enforcement and police looking in your window to make sure that you don't have more than 5 people gathered in your home for Thanksgiving dinner? And people are going to look back on it on this time, and they're going to go, that didn't happen, come on, because it is so incredible, unbelievable. Okay, but it did happen.
There's Satan's Playmate makes a comment in the chat that's up on the screen now. There's no way to answer this question, but he says that more people die of the flu. How many, excuse me, how many people died of the flu and was logged as COVID? Don't know,
I
because
don't
they
know.
stopped keeping records about flu and called everything COVID.
That is something that an investigation and a proper inquiry on this subject would possibly reveal. But nobody's really doing. Although there is a citizens inquiry now that they're trying to get up off the ground. Preston Manning is involved with, and some of the other organizations out there, and maybe that they're going to have witnesses, and maybe they're going to bring forward some evidence that's going to corroborate what he's saying. But look, the bottom line is I don't need the evidence. I don't need the statistics on this. Okay, we can see what's going on around us. I'm not a medical doctor, but I don't have to know. I don't have to be a doctor when I have my head stuck in the toilet and I'm throwing up. I know that I'm sick. I have something wrong. Okay, uh,
Yes,
I,
that's true.
there are things. There are times when you have to start to learn to trust your judgment a little bit. And this I will say also though, Nick, and very much like what happened around the Freedom Convoy, okay, is that people were afraid. And at some point in time, you sow the wind as a government official and you reap the whirlwind, as the saying goes.
That's
And
right.
this is what happened, is that the government sows all of this fear. It foments fear. And then they're surprised when the people act out of fear. And I think the same thing is happening now with this, again, the idea of whether we should have the compulsory mask wearing indoors in Ontario. It's really not based on science; it's based on fear. And I, for
Yeah, but I
one,
think
I don't want to live my life in constant fear.
I think that's the Achilles heel of this. If there's somebody pushing this mandate for other than medical reasons, they have burned people out. You cannot be afraid forever. You cannot be angry forever. You cannot be, human emotion has a life cycle, just like a human being does. You have certain amount of time uh, that you can be really, really angry about something, but sooner or later, you just get tired. And the same thing happens with fear. You can be terrified, but sooner or later, if something bad, really bad doesn't happen, two things then happen. One, you realize you were afraid for nothing. And two, now you start to get angry at the person or organization that was trying to scare you. And I
Right.
think that you're really beginning to see a lot of that in the conversations that I have on a daily basis. There's, we don't mention it in quite those terms, but there's that undercurrent where people have said, look, we're not going back to the we are not going back to the mandates. We just don't want any more to do this. COVID is history. We want to move on. It's time to move on. And I couldn't agree with them more, because for all the things that we've been told when this whole thing started, they said, wash your hands, cough into your elbow, and do all the basic sanitary things that you were told to do when you were a kid.
Right.
That's where
Basic
it all
sanitary
started.
practice. Absolutely.
And then they said, well, now you need to go a little further. And now you need, and people started to get, and, the fear got ramped up. The reactions got, then they started dividing us into non-maskers and non-maskers. And then it was vaxxers and non-vaxxers. This whole thing is just divide and conquer, and for reasons that I can't really explain, because I don't know. I can surmise, I can guess at what I think they are, but that's all it is. It's just surmising and guessing. I don't have evidence in front of me saying Trudeau is doing this or that for this particular reason. It looks that way,
But
but
it's
I
not
have no proof.
it's not Trudeau in Ontario.
Oh,
It's
I'm
Doug
just using
Ford
him
and
as
the
a scapegoat.
Conservative government. So it's everybody here. Folly knows no boundaries when it comes to political parties or anything like that. And listen, I think there's a really important point here that we haven't touched on. We have before, but since we're on the subject of masks, okay, and why the mask and why all of these measures, I think it's important to remember that part of the reason, if not the whole reason, but a major reason or part of the reason, is because we don't want our hospitals to be overcrowded with people who are sick. And it doesn't take a whole lot of people who require some urgent care to overtax our healthcare system. And so all of these measures are really not an exercise in keeping people healthy for the sake of people's health. It's really more a question of keeping people healthy in unnatural levels in order to ensure that we're not overstressing what is a shaky and frankly broken down healthcare system. And that's a subject that we can't really dissect in 5 minutes that we have here before the top of the hour. Okay, we need to really spend some time talking about the state of our healthcare system. But let's not kid ourselves. So many things that the government is doing now with respect to trying to control our behavior, ostensibly to keep us healthy, and in fairness, not a bad thing. Okay, not a bad thing. But when the government is mandating behavior, okay, is ordering you to behave a certain way, because to behave other than that might be considered to be unhealthy, understand that the reason is because we have a decrepit, crumbling healthcare system that cannot provide for the extra volume of patients that may be coming about because there is an uptick in the number of people that are showing symptoms of COVID and other respiratory illnesses, just like what happens every year at this time.
Yeah. Now, I just want to point out a couple comments that came up in the chat room. First of all, Kirk used a phrase I haven't seen in like 30 years, sick bay rangers. He's referring to people on board ship who used medical excuses to get out of work. They would go see the doctor for any little cough or sniffle, and there was a way that the medics worked together. Like a ship didn't normally have a doctor unless it was a resupply ship, a tanker. But your average destroyer and so on would have a medic, usually a petty officer, first class, and they would take your file if they thought you were a sick bay ranger, somebody looking for excuses to get out of work, and just clip one corner off it. And then when you went to your next unit, the medical records would follow you, and the medic would see it, and you go, one of those guys. Anyway, so that was just that. And Murray makes a point. He says the healthcare across Canada was in trouble long before the pandemic. And Joseph, we've talked about that before too.
Sure.
This is
Yeah.
the pandemic really is about what you just said it is. It's about a crumbling healthcare system. If we had a real epidemic, can you imagine if we had the Spanish flu epidemic of 1914 happening now in Canada?
Well,
What kind of devastation that would cause?
I was speaking to a doctor last year around this time in Winnipeg, and we were talking about this exact subject. And he said, the real thing here is people are afraid of COVID, or they're afraid of a pandemic. But the real thing is, and this was in Manitoba last year, that we don't have, this is what the doctor told me, we don't have enough facilities that could deal with any kind of a serious mishap, a serious event,
Right.
like a small apartment building collapsing, for instance,
An
which
airplane crash.
happened not that long ago in Miami.
Right. That's right. I remember that.
Things happen, and we don't have the capacity to be able to deal with them. So no wonder we don't have the capacity to deal with this new virus. And so this is the problem, is that we're not dealing with the fundamental reality that our healthcare system is literally crumbling under our feet right now, and nobody's dealing with it. And instead, we want to take draconian measures in order to force people to behave in a more healthy way. I mean, so what's the next thing? When somebody sneezes and they don't sneeze or cough into their elbow, which, look, frankly, they should be doing. That's just basic hygiene and good behavior. Okay. But are we going to, but if a bylaw enforcement officer sees somebody doing that, are they going to write them a ticket? And don't think that that's not, I mean, I'm not suggesting that that's around the corner, but what's the difference between a bylaw officer writing a ticket for kids playing together, 3 kids playing together in the park, skateboarding together, okay, or a couple walking their dog? I mean, in Quebec, they had a curfew, for crying out loud. and people were being fined for walking their dog out the side after the curfew.
Yep.
I mean, so it sounds really crazy when you say, well, nobody's going to give you a ticket. No, they're not going to have a bylaw against open sneezing. Okay. Well, why not? I mean, that's the lunacy of the behavior of the governments.
This is
And
why.
one final thought on this, Nick, and ultimately, this is really bad because ultimately, okay, government is important, and it's important to respect the authority of the government. Okay, and what this does is it brings that authority into disrepute, and what you end up having is with a government that no longer has the authority that people lend to it or have to give to it, the deference that people have to extend to government. And so you end up in a situation where you're creating a police state. Now, we're not there yet. Okay, I'm not awfulizing, I'm not pushing panic buttons, but I'm just saying that's the direction that this kind of thing is pointed into.
Yeah.
And the time to stop it really is now. So no mask mandates in Ontario, please. Okay, if you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. If you think it's going to protect you, wear your mask. You don't have to have other people wearing masks if you're wearing a mask and you think it's protecting you. Okay?
All right.
Simple as that.
With that, we have to take a break because we're at the top of the hour. We'll. This is your opportunity to go refresh your beverage and relight your stogie or stuff your pipe, whatever you're going to do.
Talking about
And
bad behavior.
no, I like. I love it. I love it. I wish I should have
My
had
my
my pipe.
room, my studio here is getting a little smoky though, but you can't really
It's
tell.
your
So
studio, Joseph. You can do in it whatever you like. All right, we'll take a break
you'd
on the
think.
Nick and Joe show, and we'll be right back after this with more.